besties, welcome back to my channel. How are we doing today? Are we sad? Happy? Let me know in the comments. If you're new, welcome. My name is BLACSIREN. In the series of Beauty and the Blade, I talk about crime cases while playing with some makeup, practicing how to do makeup. So if you're interested in that, hit that subscribe button in the face and join the family. Today's case is actually very interesting. Also a little bit different because it's a cold case. It's unsolved, and it hasn't been solved in decades, and the killer is still remaining as a missing piece to the puzzle, as well as one of the oldest unsolved cases in the United States. I'm talking about the case of Black Dahlia, the mystery of the death to a Hollywood aspiring actress. So before I forget, I'm gonna do a disclaimer for today's video. Warning, the following content may contain explicit language and graphic details on murder scenes that may be harmful or distressing to some audience. This video is only for educational, entertaining purposes and to raise awareness. Viewer discretion advised. On the morning of January 15th, 1947, around 10 a.m., a local resident, Betty Bersinger, I think that's her name, Miss Betty, she discovered a naked female body in a vacant lot on the west side of the South Norton Avenue. The victim was brutally murdered and covered in laceration and bruises. The body was cut in half. I wish I was lying, but no, it's real. When she saw the body at a first glance, she initially thought it was a discarded store mannequin because Miss Betty here, she never seen something like this. The corpse was later identified as a 22-year-old female whose name is Elizabeth Short. Elizabeth Short was born on January 29th, 1924. She's a Leo, and she's born in the Hyde Park section of Boston, Massachusetts. She was the third of 5 daughters of Cleo Short and Phoebe Short. During the Great Depression, Cleo lost most of his savings in the 1929 stock market crash. And the following year, his car was found abandoned on the Charlestown Bridge. And it was assumed that he had jumped into the Charles River. So her mother Phoebe had to pick up the responsibility. She found a job as a bookkeeper to support the family. Elizabeth underwent a surgery at the age of 15 because she was suffering from bronchitis and severe asthma attack. She turned 18 in 1942, and later that year, Elizabeth's mother Phoebe, she received an apology letter from her presumed deceased husband, which revealed he was in fact alive and he had started a new life in California. Bitch, when I was reading this, I was like, what the fuck? Who the fuck does that? So you just suddenly decided to fake your own death and leave all your kids and your wife. I am just completely in shock right now. Well, that's not funny, but sometimes you gotta find humor in these stories, okay? This brush is much better than... What the fuck is this? Like, can I help you? Elizabeth was always a good-looking, pretty girl. She had black, curly hair, nice body figure, green eyes. So growing up, she always had a dream to become a movie star. So at the age of 18, she moved to California to live with her father, whom she had not seen since age 6. Actually, it was Cleo who mentioned this to Elizabeth. He was like, hey, you can live with me in California as long as you do some house chores. I don't know. It's giving, are you looking for a maid or your daughter? And at this point, between these two, that's just my opinion. I just feel like it was more of a transactional relationship. It's like, you're my dad, I'm your daughter. If you wanted to make a redemption, provide me a shelter, right? So with that being said, there were always arguments. Cleo wasn't happy about Elizabeth's lifestyle. She didn't have a job. She was always partying, going out, and she never did chores. She never washed dishes. She never does the laundry. So it gotten to the point Cleo thought she was just mooching off of him. So he kind of just fed up. One day he just told Elizabeth, okay, that's it. You need to pack your bag and get the fuck out of here. Well, here's the thing, Cleo. What the fuck were you actually expecting? What do you think would actually happen? You faked your own death and left her when she was 6. And you really think this is going to be water under the bridge and you're gonna live happily after? Ultimately, that led to Elizabeth moving out in January 1943. She then moved to Santa Barbara where she got a job. She was working at the camp cook that was belonged to the military base. And later that year, on September 23rd, she was arrested for drinking at the local bar while underage. She was 19 at the time, but the legal age for drinking in the United States is 21. Girl just can't catch a break. After she got arrested, she was sent back to her hometown, Massachusetts, but she didn't want to stay there, so she moved to Florida, where she met a guy whose name is Matthew. Now, Matthew is a decorated Army Air Force officer of the 2nd Air Commander Group who was training for deployment to Southeast Asian theater of World War II. Allegedly, they were about to get married at the time and things were getting serious. Matthew even wrote a proposal for that. But unfortunately, Matthew died in a plane crash on August 10th, 1945, less than a week before the end of the war. What? Poor Elizabeth. What the fuck did she do to deserve this? A year later, she picked herself up, I guess. So she moved to Los Angeles and got a job working as a waitress. She also found an apartment. She shared the apartment with a roommate. And that apartment was behind the Florentine Gardens nightclub on Hollywood Boulevard. I think it's still there. And that's when she decided to chase her dream, becoming a movie star. Though she didn't do any projects, nor was she in any films, but she was variously described by literally everybody who had met her as an aspiring actress or would-be actress. So my guess is she always wanted to become a movie star, so that's why she moved to Hollywood, but dying at a young age didn't really give her that opportunity. You know what, I think I'm going to change the line to a darker color because it's not actually showing. It's like, are you there? On January 9th, 1947, Elizabeth returned to her place in Los Angeles after a short trip to San Diego with Robert, a 25-year-old married salesman. He also had a nickname, Red. Remember that. Robert dropped her off at the Biltmore Hotel in downtown Los Angeles for Elizabeth to meet her sister, Virginia, who was visiting from Boston that afternoon. But the staff of the hotel recalled having seen her using the lobby telephone, but no one actually saw Elizabeth was with another lady. Even Robert was with Elizabeth waiting in the lobby for a couple of hours, and he never saw Elizabeth's sister. As a matter of fact, at that time, Virginia was in Oakland, hundreds of miles away to the north. Suspicious, huh? So, who's lying? Was Robert lying or was Elizabeth lying? Shortly after, she was allegedly seen by patrons of the Crown Grill Cocktail Lounge, approximately half miles away from the hotel. There was another version to the story, which I don't think it's true, but I think it's worth mentioning. Allegedly, it was said Elizabeth was spending the night at the bar inside of Cecil Hotel, drinking alone that night. So if you don't know the story of Cecil Hotel is a very fucked up, sketchy hotel that has a lot of murders and death happening in that hotel. And I'm pretty sure a lot of people are familiar with the case Elisa Lam Lanker. She died in the hotel. Also, another one of the infamous serial killers, the Night Stalker, Richard Ramirez. He used to live in that hotel for a short period of time. After his killing, he would go back to the hotel and go to sleep. So that place is definitely haunted. You can't pay me enough to live there. And there was no evidence suggesting that Elizabeth was at the Cecil Hotel the night of her disappearance, nor she ever stayed in the Cecil Hotel. I think it was just the rumor that proliferated on the internet because Cecil Hotel, like the dark history of the Cecil Hotel, people just wanted to stir the pot a little bit. So that's why they were like, oh yeah, Elizabeth was in the Cecil Hotel that night. But I don't think it was real though. And that was the last alibi of her disappearance. No one has ever seen her again after that night. On the morning of January 15th, 1947, Elizabeth's body was found naked in a park. She was severely mutilated and her body was severed at the waist. It was cut in half and the upper body was like here and the lower body was like here. They're like not far away from each other, but you can see there's a gap. Yeah. She was exsanguinated, which resulted her body looked a pallid white. And the crime place had zero drops of blood, which means she got killed first, then her body was being transported to that crime scene. And get this, it was allegedly said her toes, only her big toes, was being painted with red nail polishes. Red nail polishes, and Robert's nickname was Red. Any thoughts? And medical examiners determined that she had been dead for around 10 hours prior to the discovery, leaving her time of death either sometimes during the evening of January 14th or the early morning of January 15th. The body had apparently been washed by the killer with gasoline and her face had been slashed from her mouth, the corner of her mouth to the ear, creating an effect called the Glasgow smile. And apparently I did some digging. Glasgow smile is actually a medical lingo for describing the wound. The act is usually performed with a utility knife or a piece of broken glass, creating a scar which causes the victim to appeal to smiling broadly like Joker. And you know what this reminds me of? Do y'all know the Japanese urban legend called Kuchisake Onna? I watched that movie when I was young. Like, how many people have watched that movie? Let me know in the comments. She also had several cuts on her thighs and breasts where entire portions of flesh had been sliced away. I'm not gonna post the pictures and ruin your days, nor I can. They're probably gonna take my video down. But I watched the pictures so you don't have to. Basically, her right breast was like gouged out. It was a hole. The corpse had been posed, her legs were spread apart, and her hands were posted like this. Like this. And while her eyes wide open. That's why the lady who discovered her body thought it was a mannequin at first, and her intestine. Man, her intestine was tucked under the upper body. Like, man, why would anybody do this? This is so fucked up. Bitch, I can't. Like, this motherfucker was morbid. Why would you ever do anything like this to anybody? So the technique that the killer used to cut off Elizabeth's body is being called hemicorporectomy, which means whoever was the killer, whoever had done this, must have been a professional. He has to have ample knowledge in the medical field and knows the human anatomy. Because this is something you and I, a regular person, would not able to perform. And the cut was so clean, it almost looked like it was done by machine. It was just like a straight line, like this. The coroner also noted very little ecchymosis, which means bruising, along the incision line, suggesting that it had been performed after death. So this person killed her first, then cut off her body. The cause of death was determined to be hemorrhaging from the laceration to her face and the shock from blows to her head and the face. The coroner also stated that Elizabeth's anal canal was dilated about 45 millimeters, suggesting that she was being raped. Now, I do believe that she was being essayed, but whoever did this, he was neat. She was quickly identified after her fingerprints were sent to the FBI because remember she got arrested before, so she had fingerprints in file. When the police were called to the crime scene, reporters showed up as well. When they saw Elizabeth's body, they were like, oh shit, this is gonna be sensational. This is gonna make the front page of the newspaper. Because back in the days, the newspaper was huge. It's almost like the equivalent of the internet nowadays. So they started doing some very fucked up shit. They contacted Phoebe and told her that her daughter won a beauty contest and tricked into revealing as much information as possible. Then they told her, oh, your daughter was actually, in fact, been murdered. Bitch, that's just fucked up. That's some fucked up shit. Like, what kind of people do that? They really played dirty. As for Cleo, Elizabeth's father, the police actually contacted him first because he was in California. He was the closest. The police asked him if he is willing to come to the station to identify the body. This motherfucker said, I don't give rat's ass about her. So when the news came out, it was on the front page for weeks, and that's also how she received the nickname Black Dahlia because of her hair color. And there was also a movie called The Blue Dahlia in 1946, and the actress had a similar hairstyle just like Elizabeth. And some circulated rumors also said that Elizabeth liked to put flowers as accessories, especially dahlias, on her hair. The notoriety of the crime has attracted a large number of confessions over the years, most of which have been deemed false. It was just like people randomly confessing to the police that I am the killer of Black Dahlia, I killed her. During the initial investigation into her murder, police received over 60 confessions, which they were false. They didn't do it, they just claimed to be the killer. Since that time, over 500 confessions were made, and some of them which they haven't even born at the time of her death. Although this case was never solved, but there was some suspects who were rather suspicious and could be the potential killer, which we'll talk about in a sec, but before that, I'm going to put on some lashes, and I'll be right back. On January 21st, 1947, a person claiming to be Elizabeth's killer called the newspaper stated that he is planning on eventually turning himself in, but not before allowing the police to pursue him further. And this person also told them, expect some souvenirs from Beth Short in the mail. A couple days later, on January 24th, a suspicious envelope was discovered by a US Postal Service worker. And the envelope had been addressed to the Los Angeles Examiner and the other Los Angeles papers, which individual words that had been cut and pasted from newspapers clippings. On the face of the envelope, it read, here is Dahlia's belongings, letter to follow. And the envelope contained Elizabeth's birth certificate, business cards, photographs, and there's an address book that has the name Mark Hansen on the cover. And who is Mark Hansen? We're going to talk about that in a sec. The envelope had been carefully cleaned with gasoline, just like Elizabeth's body, which it seems like whoever sent the envelope was the killer who killed Elizabeth. And the same day, another packet was received by the examiner, which it contained a handbag and a black suede shoe. Only one single shoe. And they were reported to have been seen on top of a garbage can in the alleyway 2 miles away where Elizabeth's body was disposed. And several partial fingerprints were lifted from the envelope and sent it to the FBI, but unfortunately they couldn't analyze the DNA. And also, I don't know if you noticed, back in the day, the LAPD was extremely corrupted. It could also be whoever killed Elizabeth was a powerful guy. He had the power to cover the whole thing up. So Mark Hansen, he was a wealthy local nightclub and a theater owner. Regardless to say he was loaded. He's filthy rich. And apparently he had some layers of relationship with Elizabeth, but nobody knew how deep the layers were. And he actually confirmed that the handbag and the black suede shoe that they were found in the alley actually belonged to Elizabeth. And Elizabeth's friend and roommate Anne told the investigator that she had recently rejected sexual requests from Handsome, suggesting that this could potentially be the motivation for Handsome to kill Elizabeth. But he was clear out of suspicion and there was nothing that the police could find. On March 14th, the police also found a suicide note that has been tucked into a shoe in a pile of man clothing. And the note read, "To whom may concern, I have waited for the police to capture me for the Black Dahlia killing, but have not. I am too much of a coward to turn myself in, so this is the best way out for me. I couldn't help myself for that or this. Sorry, Mary." But after investigating, the police had no clue who was the owner of the clothes, and it was another dead end. A total of 750 investigations from the LAPD and other departments worked on the case during its initial stages, including 400 sheriff's deputies and 250 California State Patrol officers. Various locations were searched for potential evidence, including the drain system and various sites along the Los Angeles River, but the searches showed no further evidence. The police were leaving no stones unturned, but nothing useful was found. Even the councilman posted a $10,000 reward for people to come forward to help the police to solve the case. $10,000 back then, it's the equivalent of $120,000 nowadays. So after they posted this reward, so many people came forward. People went nuts because the graphic nature of the crime and the subsequent letter that's been received by the examiner, that had resulted in media frenzy surrounding Elizabeth's death. Rumors started popping up saying that Elizabeth, she was a prostitute, she was a lesbian, because they were female, like women came forward. They were in a relationship with Elizabeth. They were in love. And Elizabeth was never into men. She was just using men for money and fame. Like the whole thing was adding nothing but chaos. Based on the precise cuts and dissection of Elizabeth's corpse, the LAPD looked into the possibility that the murder has to be either a doctor or a surgeon or someone with medical knowledge. In mid-February 1947, the LAPD served a warrant to the University of Southern California Medical School, which was located near the site where her body had been discovered. They checked every student in that program, but nothing was found. Nothing suspicious was found. And what about the married salesman, you asked? Now let's talk about him. Robert, aka Red. He actually did an interview with a reporter called Angie from the Herald Express newspaper. He confessed that the night before he dropped her off at the Biltmore Hotel, him and Beth checked into a roadside motel. And he said they spent the night together, but it was strictly platonic. I watched the whole article, so from my understanding after reading that article, I think they were more of a platonic companionships instead of a romantic, like, mistress kind of thing. Because he told Elizabeth about his marriage and his wife, and Elizabeth would tell him about the men he had been seeing at the time. So that's just what I thought. I don't know then, I wasn't there. I cannot speak for nobody. And also, Robert passed the 2 polygraph tests. Even though the polygraph test probably wasn't that good back in the days, but I think that should still count for something, right? And because he was one of the last people who had seen Elizabeth before her disappearance, I think it's only fair to make him the suspect. But the next person I'm going to talk about, I don't know, he just like screams, "I'm the killer." Yeah. And Dr. George Hodel. Just like others, he was also one of the suspects. He came to wider attention to a suspect after his death. He was actually accused by his own son. his own son accused him of being the Black Dahlia's killer. And his own son, Steve Hodel, he was the Los Angeles homicide detective. And prior to the Black Dahlia case, he was also a suspect to his own secretary, Ruth, and allegedly his secretary died from overdose. Yeah. Well, mind you, he was a doctor, right? So he can fake overdose in any day. And he was also accused of raping his own daughter. Yeah. And allegedly, I don't know if that's true, and allegedly she got knocked up. She was pregnant accidentally, and he was trying to perform an abortion on her daughter. It failed, so they had to give up the baby for adoption. He was actually taken to the court, but for some reason, God knows what reason, the case was acquitted. Huh. Yeah, so can we just all agree he's an asshole? And he fled the country several times from the States to the Philippines, and he actually spent his life living in Philippines from the 50s to the 90s until he passed away. Of all the suspects, he checks the most boxes, and even, let's just say hypothetically, even if he did in fact kill Elizabeth, and even if the police had the evidence to charge him, it was in the Philippines, eating Jollibees. So the 1949 grand jury report was revealed in 2003. Some investigators actually wiretapped Hodel's home and recorded some conversation that he had with an unidentified visitor. He said, "Supposing I did kill the Black Dahlia, they couldn't prove it now. They can't talk to my secretary because she's dead." And there was another audio that they captured. It was a lady screaming. She screamed twice, then that was it. And if that doesn't scream, "I am the killer," I don't know what it is. But unfortunately, he was never arrested, nor was there enough evidence to make him the killer. So what do you think? Do you think the killer was the rich guy Handsome, or the married salesman Robert, or Dr. Hodel? Or someone else? Let me know in the comments. It sucks that we might never find out what the killer is, and this case will probably remain as a cold case forever because whoever killed Elizabeth was already dead. How could they find out? And now, ladies and gentlemen, that's the story of Elizabeth Short, aka the Black Dahlia. Thank you so much for watching this video, and if you enjoyed this video, please like, comment, subscribe, and remember, be safe, be vigilant, and take care.